So, welcome to today's webinar coming from Knapsack, and we're going to talk about design system roadmap and strategy for the enterprise. So, we're going to do introductions. So, I'm going to quickly flick to myself and say, hey, I'm Mark. I'm a design system consultant, and I do a lot of work with Knapsack, work on lots of amazing projects with incredible customers, especially across enterprise design systems. So yeah, that's me, and I'm an advisor and consultant, and I will hand it over to Ashley to introduce yourself too.
Hey everyone, I'm Ashley Willard. I'm Director of Product Design at Aperture, which is a small fintech company. We make banking software for small to medium-sized banks who don't have their own digital teams. My team is getting ready to start building our design system. We're smaller and scrappier than the other two panelists here who are more accustomed to larger organizations who have, whole design system teams, maybe even some design ops. We don't have any of that. So we are just designers and developers who are about to embark on a mission to build our design system with help from Knapsack, of course. So I'll be coming from that lens, and I'm sure there are a few of you out there who are in a similar kind of position.
Awesome. Thank you, Ashley. And Nick, over to you.
Sweet. Hello. Thanks. Hey, all. I'm the design leader on the design system here at Bill, formerly Bill.com. We're a fintech company, been around since the mid-2000s. We support a bunch of small and medium customers all over the world. But my background has been in design. I've been in the tech design space for quite a long time, managing teams, was in consulting, advertising space. But my design system tenure really started when I was at IBM. I was design principal over there and design manager for the IBM Cloud platform team, where we helped roll out Carbon 10 to like 150 applications. We built a system of systems design system, kind of pioneered that. So I've been in the space for about 8 years. I've worked in a lot of banks and kind of large corporations, enterprises that have been trying to roll out design systems and just figure this out. So happy to be here, and thanks.
Awesome. It's great to be here. Great team panelist. All right, so we're going to run through today's plan. So today we're going to be talking about atomic audit. So we all go through an audit process as part of our design system. So we're going to look at breaking that down, how to organize and define components for scalability. We're going to take a look into the team model, so a team operating model, so understanding roles, responsibilities, and accountability. We're going to take a deep dive into vision and principles, so where we bring company design and potentially design system principles together. We're going to have a look at the adoption framework. So we might look at community. We're going to take a look into usage and how important that is, and maybe aligning some metrics and stuff. We'll talk about roadmap development, so focusing on the impact that you can have rather than some of the stuff that you might not be able to have. And then deployment strategies. So we're going to focus around relationships and workflows of engineering when it comes to that. And then we're going to talk in terms of QA, and answer questions and have conversation. And that's going to be what we're up to today. So I want to hand it over immediately to this amazing concept that Nick's going to take us through around the kind of audit process. So audit process and interfunctioning elements and sheets and all sorts of amazing things. So Nick, please take us through that.
Sure thing. Yeah. So I've been at Bill for about 6 months. We went public in 2019. Just a little background, help give context for what I'm going to show. We went public in 2019 and had a few acquisitions that we did in the time since then. If anyone else has been through an acquisition, it can be pretty messy, especially when we're talking about how we operate together and what assets we use and kind of merge those together. And Bill's had a design system in general for about four-ish years. But the challenge now is we're at a state where we've got multiple design systems that started from different companies that have now come into one. And we're kind of doing this like Marie Kondo style, find the components that best bring us joy, and say thank you and goodbye to the ones that were previously there. So we kicked off an audit, and I'm just gonna quickly show you some screens on this and talk about like maybe a way you could approach it. I typically I love to jump into like FigJam or something similar and start like dropping images and kind of organizing that way, as a lot of us in the design space would do. One of the amazing designers that works closely with me, she's like, why don't we put this in a table? And then she's like, why don't we do it in a multi-dimensional table? So she dropped everything into I'm going to share here in a second. She dropped everything into a Google table, which is a lot like Airtable. And we have at least 9 kind of functional design systems-ish, but we have many multiple, dozens of places you can go find assets for that. And as we all know in the design system world, source of truth is the holy grail, right? Of like where to go to find the thing that's relevant to you. And so we went through all of these. This isn't even a complete list. We're still kind of doing the audit. We went through and we assigned what type of what each component is, what design system it's in, links to it with screenshots. And we assigned what, if it's an atom, if it's a molecule, and if it's an organism and whatnot. This has given us an immense amount of leverage when communicating with our management, and helping folks just realize like, hey, I know we've combined kind of 4-ish design systems, but like there's actually a lot of stuff in the closet, and this really opened the door to that. And a lot of people are like, oh, I want to run pivot tables on this, and like let's get some charts to show all this different stuff. And on top of this, what's neat is we actually went in and tried to identify what are all the properties that are assigned to each component. So like autocomplete, has open value loading, like where they come from, and if they're coming from APIs, or they're coming from themes. And so what's neat about this is it gives us this like really huge list of all the things that we need to start chopping down, and emerging and saying, hey, we've got 4 or 5 different versions of buttons and whatnot. How do we pick the one that's going to serve us best going forward, and modify it from there?
Nice. So yeah, I can relate to like the workshop side of this. So like, FigJam, always do FigJam audit process. We call it interface inventory, break down everything into components, what atoms are we using, what tokens are being used, build tables next to it and all of that kind of stuff. This is the first time I've actually seen this, like this way of doing it. And the fact that it's like you said, like multi-dimensional is incredible. So I'm actually going to take this approach. I'm going to apply it to the next phase. I still feel like the workshop environment
Yeah.
gets everything going. I love that piece. But I'm definitely going to be like, oh, to consolidate that into like a
Yeah.
spreadsheet and stuff actually
Yeah.
sounds really nice. So yeah, I'm into that.
It's cool as designers, I think as a general theme, I've seen, and I suffer from this, like getting into and dealing with large data sets can be a hurdle, right? And like a lot of us weren't trained in that. A lot of our, like the last, especially we've been in this field for 10 plus years, it's not something like, a lot of it was us just like making stuff up. And so having to have data and back it up is not necessarily new to everybody, but I don't think is a really strong muscle for a lot of us. And it feels good to see it in this way. And there's been dozens of times where I'm like, let me go look up this one thing, and I can click right on the Figma file for that and go get it, and even though we don't have everything combined, this is such a great resource for people to be like, I really need to know where the Figma file is for that label component, and now you can go do it. So it's pretty cool.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. And I feel like this part of the process you can like research, like you can just search for like, oh, okay, that particular piece
Yeah.
and find it, like you said, like really, really fast. I think that is a massive bonus. Like I'm gonna big that piece up.
Cool.
That search functionality sounds incredible.
Nice.
Awesome.
Curious, Nick,
Yeah.
and Mark,
Yeah.
do you have a sense now, looking at the long list that you have, of how many atoms you want to sort of aim for once you go
Great
through
question.
and do all of this auditing? And
Yeah.
I heard a great talk about this at a knapsack event, actually, like a couple months ago in New York, from Robin Cannon, where he talked about
Mm.
really trying to whittle it down to a very small number of atoms, and make it more about the ingredients and the recipes, right? Like
Yeah.
empowering the people that are using these small ingredients to know how to build recipes with them.
Yeah.
What's your thoughts? And
That's a great way to position it. And Robin always nails it with that kind of
yeah.
stuff. It's I'm very much in agreement. And as we're looking at this, like doing the Marie Kondo work, it really is like, can we get to 5 or 10? I'm not trying to whittle down necessarily. I'm not trying to say we only need 5 or 10, but like in the next few months, can we get to a point where we've got 5 or 10 atoms that everyone is aligned with, that are rock solid, the code works amazing, it's documented perfectly, everyone has trust in it? Because right now, trust is hard to come by, because like, which one is the right one? Is this doc out of date? Like, that ambiguity adds a lot of chaos into the system. And so looking to rebuild trust, I think, is get a few of them really, really good and see what people make of it. That plays into, and I think we'll touch on this a little bit later, just sort of the idea of like enabling the system of systems. So if we build our rock solid core, others build on top of that and build their own organisms and molecules on top of that, but having the governance and guidance to kind of do that as well, so it doesn't go Wild West. But yeah, I don't have a specific number. I'm assuming, I think I've been reading around there, like in the low 20s seems to be a good number. But man, I really would love to get 5 that work great right now.
Yeah. Same.
Yeah, I mean, from my perspective as well, I've seen teams now like come round at like 3 or 4 components. So they actually go through this audit process and they realize that in most cases they are using the card component and like a navigational type component, and they just create, say, 3 or 4 or maybe 5 like component types. And then actually everything is some form of variant of that singular kind of component. So that's an interesting route that I've seen recently. I haven't seen that much in the past. It's always been kind of our expectations of, building it up and here's a million different components.
Right.
But yeah, so I actually have seen that approach recently, and it's actually really nice. There's one team that I've recently taken through this process, and actually understanding that and going through like even naming the thing the same was pretty awesome.
Cool.
Actually feels really comfortable.
Yeah.
So I'm going to move us on to like the team, right? So there's something really specific that I want to go over, which is like understanding the roles. So I think we've talked about in the past, like designers, right? So what are designers like in the design system space? Like what roles do designers take? And then what other roles need to be, a part of a design system and a design system practice? What are your thoughts on that?
So we are
Nice.
approaching it with a product owner overseeing this sort of the whole initiative of building our design system, a couple of designers, myself included, and a few front-end developers. And then our plan is to consult with others throughout our organization who have been here a long time and are working on individual products throughout the organization. We're coming at a little bit of a similar project as what Nick was talking about, but in our case, we don't have established design systems out there yet. That's never been done. So we have lots and lots and lots and lots and lots of repeated, elements across all of our products that might be slightly different from one page to the next because they're all still individually coded everywhere.
Yeah.
So we're trying to unify all of that and have one button that rules them all. So our plan is to really consult a lot with people throughout our organization, but those are the key roles. And we talked a little bit yesterday about whether a design system is a product. We did want to have somebody from product overseeing this to make sure it would be successful.
Oh, this is too good. Let's dive into that. Let's hit that straight away. So we're going from like the team, like responsibilities and stuff, but actually what is a design system and is it a product? Is it a practice? So let's unleash it.
I have a lot
Nick,
of
you
thoughts.
have some strong thoughts on this.
Yeah.
We need to hear these.
I'm actually pretty adamant that design systems are not a product. And I remember that terminology coming around a few years ago. And I thought it did a good job of like galvanizing internally to help say like, this is a legit thing. This isn't a side project. We have real staff assigned to it. And it definitely helped move us forward in our maturity as a practice, design system practice overall. But I think it puts us in a really awkward position because we're held to the standards of what product does within an organization and for the organization. So products have customers that are external. They have choice of to use the product or not, and they pay us in some way, shape, or form, right? Whether it's with their time, data, money, whatever. We don't adhere to any of those in the design system. There's aspects of that, sure, people can choose to use it or not, maybe depending on the organization, but what I found, what it does is like, even at Bill, where we are a product team, design is under product. We don't have a header or separate product organization. So we've got product and engineering, and we're nestled under it. So we report up through to a VP of product, who's amazing. But their goals, their KPIs, their annual goals and quarterly goals are all about like moving product metrics. And then we look at ours and we're like, we sort of assist those, but like what we're doing day to day doesn't actually directly impact those metrics. So oftentimes I find myself scrambling to look at like operations teams goals and going, oh, we're looking to improve efficiency and make it fat and building things faster and improving accessibility and like just making it better to do our jobs as design and product makers. And so I love the idea of having somebody in a product management-ish kind of hat. I would argue that maybe we need more of like a really strong program manager role that does the road mapping, does the coordinating, helps on project management, but like isn't trying to do product management in the classic sense. And I would also go as far as to say that like I would love to see design system teams in operations groups, even if you don't have design ops group. I mean, I don't see how we're that much different than design ops group. Like we are, part of it almost in what we do. But like, even if we just lived within an ops org within the company, I think our success, what we're trying to do lines up more with what they're trying to do. But yeah, we'll see if it ends up going that route in the industry.
Yeah, well, that's like the point you made about metrics. Like, I think KPIs and metrics come up a lot when we're trying to sell in the value of design systems, or what I always say is like progressively like continue to sell in the value of design systems. And if you attach yourselves like to the operations, and you can say like moving these different things, these needles, on the operational sense, and we're saving you money. And if that function exists in the enterprise, that makes like that makes a total sense and a clear pathway to assign ourselves the design system to that KPI or those KPIs. I like that route. It's nice.
Yeah,
I want to hear the other
that's
argument there.
oh.
No, it is a product.
I don't feel strongly one way or another. I mean, especially since we're only just about to get started. So, but I've heard it said a lot that it should be thought of as a product. So I like hearing Nick's counter argument to that. But also, to speak to the metrics and all of that, I mean, for as long as I've been at Aperture, which is almost 5 years, I've been shouting about how we need to build a design system. But when I rephrased it that way, when I reframed it that way, and spoke of the things you were just talking about, we need this so that we can build accessibility in everywhere. We need this so that we can move faster and save money and get to things that will be more valuable. We need this so that we can scale the way we want to over time to, for our products to be able to do things that they can't do today because of these limitations. That's what moved the needle. And that's what got everybody, all the way up to our CEO. It's a mandate from him that we're going to do this in 2024. And that's why cool. We got that. So if you're trying to sell, your organization on building a design system, it's get those metrics, find those points that speak to the money, right?
Yeah.
And the benefit.
Yeah. Amy in the chat made a great point about the metrics and adoption and improving accessibility. I mean, accessibility is such a huge one too. But yeah, Amy, you're more than welcome to disagree. It's a great conversation. I don't think it's necessarily one size fits all. And I love what you're saying, Ashley, that like if it gets the job done, like it almost doesn't matter what it's called. I just think we need to be aware that if we're held to the standard of like more users using our product, we might struggle to prove those metrics. So just being conscious of like our KPIs inside of a product org, talking about efficiency and measuring things like accessibility, right? And making sure that those are tracked and we see growth in that place is important.
Yeah, it's a very good point. And we actually, she mentions there, so Amy, you mentioned here adoption. So I wonder if this is a really good point as we talk about KPIs, as we talk about roles and responsibilities. Actually, let's dive into the adoption framework. And I know that we've
Mark, can I add one last note on team model and roles? I think I found it this is actually a theme throughout just design as a practice maturing throughout organization or the world over the last 30 plus years, digital design. I think designers take on they've put on a lot of hats, right? And it's funny we mentioned like product managers. I have found myself more times than I'd like to admit that I'm ended up doing like product managing stuff without even realizing it, right? And I think it's important for us to spend the time to like take all the hats off and like lay them out and go, oh, that's product management. This is like kind of scoping. This is actual design work. This is managing up and out. This is like communications, right? This is team operate. Like there's so many hats that we wear in the design system space. It can feel overwhelming, and sometimes we don't even know that we're doing those tasks. So I found it really healthy to do anything in the sense of like a RACI or DACI kind of model. And folks who aren't sure what that is, we can talk about that if that's interesting. But yeah, inventorying the roles that we do, even if you don't ever go back to it, just to get it down on the page and like be conscious of it I found a really healthy practice.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Yeah, that's definitely what often run through an entire workshop around, yeah, roles, responsibilities, just so you can see it, even if you kind of know, but also that voices it out to the rest of the team. So the rest of those interacting with the design system, understanding each other's roles, and picking out like 3 key responsibilities for each role and just seeing it. So yeah, absolutely.
Cool.
All right. Yeah, so let's head in. Let's head into that adoption space. So I think we talked yesterday a little bit about this, but let's talk about like actual usage. What does adoption mean? We've got community as part of adoption. We've got like actual usage, just getting people to use it, and like the separation. We have this thing around trying to inform implementation, trying to take control of implementation. But is that really what we're supposed to do?
What do you think, Ashley?
Hard for me to say so far, since we don't have anyone who actually use it. So like I said, the design team has been using these components within our design files forever, but in the actual code, they are just design artifacts that we have documented and hope that what they build is sort of like them. So we're going to be working towards trying to drive engagement as we get into this project. Our part of our initiative is going to be that one of our product teams is going to pilot with us. So they're going to ride alongside us. We probably, I think we have 11 different Scrum teams. So one of those teams is going to be our pilot team. They're going to be there with us, and they're going to be the first one to start implementing these components as we build them, so that we're, testing this as we go. We're stress testing, making sure everything that the decisions we're making are viable and good, and being able to make some mistakes and learn from them before we start deploying to everybody else. So that's the only real tactic I know of at this point about adoption.
How did you get that one? Like you have 11 teams that might adopt at some point. Like what was how did you arrange with them, and like what were the discussions like?
As I recall, I think I asked for volunteers, really. So last summer we did a small kind of pilot to just see if building a component and then deploying it across all the product was even feasible with our infrastructure. We wanted to make sure that we could do that. And so in that pilot, we had all the front end folks from across the organization involved. It wasn't like something that took all of their time for 2 weeks or anything like that. It was just, we had a Jira board and assigned tickets to the folks who wanted to take them on. So that just happened to be that one of the teams that was really engaged, really wants to do this, really wants to get to this point sooner rather than later. And when I said, we need a volunteer team that will work alongside us when we start building, they jumped.
That's cool. I've got that reminded me, I want to talk about something happening at Bill right now, but I think it's I learned a kind of a rough lesson when I was at IBM. We were our cloud platform team, we supported essentially about 400 designers and using the design system for using Carbon to create applications on IBM Cloud. And I was there for the rollout of Carbon 10. And we were trying to adopt Carbon 10 for like 150 some odd applications on the cloud platform. I had not really distinguished adoption from implementation. And I use these terms now separately. And adoption to me is much more about like the cultural adoption of the system. You know, do designers and engineers start their day by looking at the documentation, going to the source of truth to know what they should start working on, or are they just like pulling old files and hoping for the best? And is it part of their rituals and practices to like leverage the system, right? That's adoption to me, versus implementation, which is great. They've built the designs, they've coded some, they've helped code some components and whatnot. But implementation is like actually rolling out the new UI to product. That's where I made a mistake, where I didn't get product managers on board early enough, and we lost about 6 months of time from the point of like, we had all the assets and resources for all the teams to start building their new version. And there was a lot of like, yeah, sure, cool, we'll do it. And then just dragging feet. And so it took a pretty major top-down initiative to tell everyone they have to adopt or have to implement the design system in the new UIs. So those two things were separate, and I've taken that in all of my consultation from then on out. But you reminded me what you're talking about with volunteers. Mm-hmm. I took a little bit of a different approach when I joined Bill around getting folks excited about the design system and starting to use it more. I had kind of always done a volunteer style basis, right? And like, hey, whoever wants to help out, like build components and jump into design jams and do critiques and blah, 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 and create new components. At Bill, we realized that we're building this like system of systems. And we've got representatives from each of the product areas within the company. We've created a program called the Design System Librarians Guild. And the librarians are essentially like deputized representatives from engineering, design, content from each of the product areas. And they are our core working, like they're both a consultative group, and also some of them are part of a working group that actually help build the components and maintain them. That's just getting off the ground, right? There's a lot of we're only a few months in, but we've essentially got those librarians identified. And so we ended up kind of doing a little bit more of like a top down. We worked with all the management teams to make sure that that was something that would work for folks. And then now we're kind of taking a bottom up, like, okay, we've identified there's 2 or 3 slots per product area. Who's going to fill those slots? And then how do we build the cadence of working together in that way? And it kind of follows one of our principles about making sure that the design system happens with people, not to them. And so having them co-own the design system is a really big part of where we're looking to go.
I love that. Yeah, I think that's very true, that I think some of our engineers who haven't worked this way before, and this is it's a change, it's a huge change to them. And you're probably very spot on there that this feels like a thing that's about to happen to them rather than with them. And I'm going to take that back as a way to reframe it, because yes, I have been thinking a lot about how we will socialize and how we will evangelize, right? Once we do start to have this ready to go.
Cool. Amy asked a question in the Q&A, and it's relevant for now, so I might as well answer it. We identified it just going through basically the org chart. We looked at who the engineering leaders are for each area in the management for both engineering and design, and then just like kind of did a roadshow and went around and talked about our strategy. I probably presented the same deck 15 times. My engineering peer, I think on the 14th time, was like, "Can you just do this with your eyes closed this time?" Because just evangelizing it, right, and hearing people out, helping them get caught up with what's going on, and then saying, hey, our ask for you is that you're going to have representatives that are part of the system. And like, they're like, hell yeah, like, I don't want this to just go off and then I'm stuck with something that doesn't work for us. So there's a bit of a shift in the culture there.
You're right. I have heard the nickname Bulldog from our CTO because of how persistent I am and how much I've been yelling and screaming about this for so long. He said it fondly, like that he respected my persistence and blah, blah, blah. But you're absolutely right. You have to kind of, I've given the same thing, the same presentation 20 times,
Yep.
and I know exactly what you're talking about. You just kind of have to be prepared to repeat the same message for a while.
Yeah.
It
Yep.
gets through eventually.
What would you say, Ashley, and what would you say as far as like how long that took from
Oh,
sort of,
boy.
we really need to do it to like getting
Yeah.
folks kind of really bought in? What was your time frame for that?
In trying seriously to get it done, I would say about a year. So we engaged a consultancy, or we were already engaged with them for some other projects. So we had them help us develop a pilot plan about a year ago. And that resulted in them creating a big deck that was pitched to, executives to explain why we should do this. And then nothing came of it. So then flash forward to last summer, I initiated the pilot to do internally that I spoke of before, where we just wanted to stress test, make sure we could do this. And in the meantime, I, again, had a few different decks about why we should do this that I was repeatedly showing to anyone that would listen.
Yeah.
And following that pilot, that's when I started to finally really get the buy-in from the executive level folks that, and they started to recognize, like I said, that, for example, we want to build a lot more configurability into our front end, right? Where our clients can, customize things a lot more the way that they want to, because we're B2B, but then their customers are our end users too. So, and we can't do that. We can't get there. And, so, really the executives starting to understand that in order to get where we need to be in a few years, we have to lay this groundwork now. But I think it did take us about a year to get from beginning to end there to where I was, where we signed our contract with Knapsack and are ready to begin.
Nice.
I'm interested to hear your thoughts on whether you had to shape your deck and your presentations differently for different audiences. I know I've had to do that many times and work with teams to do so. So, what are your thoughts on that? Getting buy-in from different groups within the organization, for example, different stakeholders. Have you gone through that process?
I definitely have. Buy-in from leadership, executive leadership versus buy-in from our engineering organization are two different things. And it goes back a little bit to that adoption, right? The definition of deployment or whatever we said versus adoption. The engineering team doesn't need to say, yes, we'll do this. They're being told, yes, you have to do this, but we need to get them bought into caring about it, being part of it, all of that stuff. So I definitely show different or bring up different points depending on the audience. But in terms of selling it, I don't think it was that different for different executives. You know what I mean? Different hats in the C-suite. I don't think I had to frame it too differently. Yeah.
Cool. So I'm just gonna hit us with the what do we look at in terms of the deployment strategy, or like the vision and principles. So how do we match kind of the vision? I think Nick, you were talking about vision a minute ago and kind of how that fits in. Ashley, you've gone through a process of getting to alignment around vision and principles, and then how that quickly maybe we can navigate to how we then get to the deployment and relationships between engineers and designers and stuff.
Yeah.
Go
ahead, Ashley. You want to go? You do it.
Sure. I'll share real quick. Hopefully yes. So we've gone through, and a lot of you probably have done this sort of thing too. We've gone through an exercise to develop our design principles. So these are not our design system principles, which I think are a different set of principles. And that is something that hopefully we will work on as we build our design system. But just our general design principles. This was a whiteboard and post-it note kind of workshop to hone in on, and we included engineers in this as well as designers, and to hone in on what the key important principles were for us. So yeah, I think having these and then developing a set for your design system specifically, and Nick, maybe you've already done that. It sounded like you had some principles specifically for your design system, so I'd love to hear about that.
Yeah, it's funny. I feel like every big project I've ever been on, I have the nagging feeling that we should develop some principles first, and then I don't really know how to do it. It's probably my weakest point. I think I have a couple of like broad principles that I've just said a few times that are less like adopted and more the making sure it's happening with people, not to people. That's just kind of a general life principle. And then like pushing for co-ownership versus like ivory tower kind of, we're going to build a thing and deliver it to you. So yeah, we haven't done principles, which is funny. I think they're kind of like a work in progress as we keep hearing ourselves say the same things over and over.
Yeah.
But we were lucky to kind of nudge the vision from one of kind of a component factory. That's how we ended up with 200 something components, to where we've shifted the narrative. The practice hasn't changed too much, but the narrative has changed, as in like there's a much bigger acceptance that we are a program team. We're supporting other teams to be more successful, but there's a collaboration there. It's not like, hey, build us this variation of a component and then maintain it forever and build it exactly the way we want. It's much more of a conversation. We're thinking a lot more about like, how do we track tickets when people submit requests, and how do we look at trends of the number of, if we've gotten 30 requests for things around one component, maybe that component's kind of messed up. But we didn't have any of that data before. It was just like random Slack messages, and it didn't get, in office hours and stuff. So really looking at us as a support framework for everyone else to do their jobs has been the vision change. Do we still get requests on a daily basis to change a component that's in our library? That's probably going to go away. Yes. But the practice is still in that takes a little longer for the rubber to meet the road there.
Yeah, and in developing our principles, it was like you said, they were already things that were inherent to all of us. It was things, it was the sticky notes that were repeated over and over again in that workshop that ended up our principles. So I think you kind of already have that. Now, does anyone ever go and read all of this documentation that we created around our principles? Probably not. And that's a whole separate thing, right? And again, adoption is when you do have that sort of level of documentation, how do you get people to read it, look at it, care about it?
Yeah.
All right. There's so much more we can unpack right now. So we're gonna stop there and ask for Q&A. So we're gonna open up for Q&A now. So we're going to do about 10 minutes of Q&A, I think, here. So I think that's live Q&A, is that right?
Well, there's a couple in the chat right now, and one from Andrew for me. I will take while others put theirs in. So so we've used Zero Height as our platform for documenting our design system stuff for the last several years. As I had mentioned, so far our design system is really just design artifacts and is not actually realized in code. And in making that shift, a couple of reasons we wanted to switch to Knapsack. One is that Knapsack is not just a platform where we dump a lot of information, but it's a two-way. It's a end-to-end kind of platform that will allow designers to have our hands in things more than we do currently. The code feeds into the Knapsack platform, and we're in there, and developers are in there, and we can all be in the same place together. So it's that single source of truth that's so hard to kind of come by and unify behind. And then it's also because Knapsack's team is going to be, and I talk to someone from Knapsack pretty much every day at this point. We're like this, right? Their team are here to help us along the way. And in a small organization like ours, where we don't have a design system team, we don't have experts in this area really. And, this is very new to a lot of people. It's so valuable to have a partner who's going to help us do this successfully instead of us having to build and figure it all out on our own. And the question right above that is a little similar in terms of building, all on your own versus using something out there, right? How to recognize when it's better to build from zero versus using an out of the box kind of design system. My thoughts on that is just, what do you have time for? What's possible for you? Do you have a full design team that's ready to embark on let's build everything from scratch? Naming things is incredibly hard. Just, it takes a long time just to go through and create all that stuff. Is there reason for you to do that? Is it worthwhile for you to do that, to have your own proprietary stuff instead of using something off the shelf?
I've got a couple real world kind of attempts at using stuff off the shelf. So I had a client once that had a bunch of design system assets and was struggling to have it meet their needs and build enough components at a time. And so they're like, let's just pick up Angular material, like pick it up wholesale. And that can work in some cases. The issue they ran into is that Angular material, it's kind of wasn't made for their industry. And they end up having to modify things so intensely that the number of modifications wasn't worth it. It bogged them down. On the flip side, I think there's an idea, there's a in between of like adopting aspects of design systems. I think we're at the point, I remember 10 or 15 years ago, I think at some point we were all in for those old enough and enough gray hairs, we were all in Photoshop, like designing buttons and like making tons of buttons over and like just like basic theme items that you could use all over the place. And I remember telling some design students at some point, I'm like, stop making buttons, just use what's out there. Like, this is kind of before design guides and a lot of the, the stuff that assets we have now. And I'm kind of in that same state with design systems. I'm like, stop rewriting how search should work. Exactly. Go look at what's out there. It's almost all open source and you don't have to figure it out. And search is a great example of like it being a pattern. The actual component itself visually is like a box with an icon, but like type ahead and like all the other, is it search and a whole site? Is it search in a table? Like there's so many versions of it. I'll plug Carbon because I think their search pattern is probably one of the best for enterprise. But there's a bunch of great ones out there. And I think generally that's kind of the approach I'm starting to take more, is like, pick what's out there and make it your own. But do that in the design and documentation phase before you get into code, or think about it from picking up code wholesale can sometimes bog you down more than add speed.
Yeah, and just to add to that, I've seen it work really well for like large scale enterprise where they pick up like Material UI, for example, and they specifically choose for a period of time, like the React MUI library. But they like from an enterprise perspective, that's like planned in. It's not like we're going to make this decision, this is going to be the end. It's like we'll plan this in to get us to this part, and this adoption rate and these metrics. And then, the next phase will be customization, making sure that we, build appropriate experiences and appropriate components and templates, moving into the next phase. So it can be leveraged really successfully. But I have also been part of teams where like you pick it up and it is a pain and it just gets in the way. So it really depends. There's definitely decisions to be made and phases to build in, as part of your platform. So we have another question at the bottom here from Carla. So how do you measure design system adoption?
Classic.
Yeah, very classic.
Answer to this one too.
So in terms of what to measure, so when it comes to adoption, I would break it down into like three different buckets maybe. So one of them that I'd super hyper focused on would be actually community. So like measuring adoption is around building a culture and a practice change to actually approach like product design and product build with a design system approach. So how would you measure that? Well, measuring engagement in the community, measuring peer-to-peer reviews and communications. That's harder to measure from like a baseline or from like a data point. But then you've also got the component usage, template usage, and pattern usage. And that could be
Mhm.
both in design and also in code and in production. There are some great tools coming together. Obviously, Knapsack are building things around analytics, and really you can pick up the actual metrics and get very specific on those. So that's also one. And then another one that I tend to kind of lean towards is like onboarding. So how fast can you
Mhm.
onboard a new person or even somebody that's been in the organization for a while to the design system, using it, going from concept to production. So we're taking this time frame. The idea is taking this time frame from going from concept to into production, working through product design and engineering, and we're doing this, and we're shortening it to like this length, and that's all through your onboarding process. And again, that's design onboarding, that's engineering onboarding, and having a platform to enable that to be like fast and efficient. So I kind of put most things in those three buckets. Don't know what your thoughts are, Ashley and Nick, on that approach. Whether you disagree completely, hey, what are you talking about?
No, we don't have any way to measure right now. So I'm looking forward to the built-in metrics that we'll be able to have once we do start to build and implement the components. It's so across the board with us because we have some products that have been designed and built from scratch by our team in the last couple of years, and we have others that by way of acquisitions and other things like that. It's years and years and years worth of Frankenstein code that we're going to have to do so much more work to sort of streamline and modernize. So yeah, it's very hard for us today to look across everything and see which teams or who or which pages, which products are using what.
I think it's probably one of the hardest things at our point in design system maturity as an industry. Now that we're getting closer to, having a lot more visibility on it. I feel like it was Skunkworks projects for design systems were Skunkworks project for a few years, and now it's like VPs and heads of blank are aware of it, and they're like, okay, show us the numbers. It's super hard because I don't think we have the tools and the practices, and I think it's going to take a couple more years before it becomes industry like standard practice and easy tools to do it. I tend to err towards the culture change metrics around people's practices of just using it day to day. And that sometimes just straight through like surveys or talking to managers and talking about their practices and helping them inject like part of their QA process or part of their critique process is like referencing the design system documentation, and helping support managers and directors to do that on like a weekly or sprintly basis. And we can see some of those changes coming in. Like we can track, in Figma, we can see who's editing things or who's using things, but actual like code in end product using components it's really hard. So it's almost like I'm more interested in solving the top of the funnel or the start of the journey of like making sure people are all just using it. And even if that means we're gonna have some variation once it gets into end product, that's better than like everyone just making up shit on their own every day. And it's kind of like baby steps. And even in the most mature organizations, I think I was at Facebook for a quick minute during COVID and during the lockdown. And they're probably one of the only companies I've worked for where they're like every single conversation is it in the Facebook design system? Like they were very regimented about it, almost to a fault where it made creativity quite difficult. But I guess if you have billions of users, there's a good reason to be very strict on those things. But I haven't worked with other companies that it's like totally baked into the culture to say the design system is a source of truth. Go to that all the time. So that's the kind of like tracking of metrics that I've been trying to focus on now.
I've thought about making a pop quiz for
Yeah.
for my colleagues, and maybe framing it more as like fun trivia or something. But let's see how much you can answer if I say what is the right way to use this thing, or whatever. Like,
Yep.
Put together a little trivia contest on the things that are documented clearly in all of our documentation, and see if people can answer the questions.
Sure. Yep.
Make it fun if you can.
Sounds like a fun quiz. Can I take it?
Yeah. It depends on who you are. It might not be that fun if you're, for certain people. I'll answer Amy's question because I love it. It's
Yeah.
impressive to keep focus for a year. How did you maintain the drive? Gosh, I don't know, Amy. I think it's partly just my nature to be patiently persistent. I think I really like the company I'm at and our culture, and I know that folks at the highest levels trust their people. And so it felt to me like a battle that could be won. And that's why I kept at it. And I think, in some cases, you might know that it's not a battle that you're going to ever win in your culture, in your organization. But I think for me, it felt achievable, and I just had to keep at it. And that speaks to just about everything I do every day. I feel like sometimes you just really have to play the long game. It's a marathon, not a sprint.
I feel like on that note, I felt this like shifting tides in like 2021-ish, where all of a sudden I saw hundreds of jobs that were design systems in the title.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, whoa, this is weird. Like I've had to like pretend we're doing this as a design manager or just like Skunkworks design team. And so I really feel like the tides have shifted towards design systems are a part of the way we build products. It's like, to me, it's akin to engineering latching onto sprints and agile and like moving towards a new process to build stuff. And I know design systems aren't just designers, and it's an inclusive. I hate that we call it design. Can we come up with a better name? We've been talking about this for years.
Yes.
But the idea that we have to like prove to people that we need one feels like it's less of a fight now. And now it's more of like, how do we do it, and how much effort, how long, right? And I've experienced this over and over again of like, okay, let's do it first. Let's do it for a quarter. We'll build a design system. We'll take a quarter. And it's like, no matter what the timeline is, it's getting folks to realize that you're changing the way of work for how we build digital products. It's moving from like, building individual handcrafted unique UIs to like, we're moving more into like, I've talked about this in a former podcast with Knapsack actually, around, we're kind of moving into the phase of like how the car moved from handcrafted into, mass produced. And not that all of our products are going to be totally mass produced, but like the core building blocks, cars, you don't build a new infotainment or engines for every single car. It's like they're used over and over again and they're iterated on. And I think we're finally getting to that point in the software world. And so, yeah, I'm excited that it's moving into this new phase. But now it comes to that other question that we just had about, let's prove the ROI. And what metrics are in there? We don't have the tools for it yet.
Yeah, I think one of the ways that I'm trying to get engineering organization excited about it is, get them thinking about, if you don't have to rewrite the same code over and over again, think about all the things you'll have time for, right?
Yeah.
Maybe do some more innovative things, more interesting things. So
yeah.
Awesome. I want to cover off a part of Amy's question, which is actually just come up like super interestingly, which is around accessibility. So it's a big topic in design systems, and there is like certain like accreditations and things that you can go through and get up to a certain standard. How does accessibility play into, as Amy's kind of poised it, into metrics? So has that come up for you both? Like, has accessibility come up as a way to maybe the design system improves accessibility and therefore we hit our standards? And there's like legal things around it as well in certain places and locations. I don't know if that's something you've come across.
yeah, definitely. I mean, it's part of how I sold it, was that we can address accessibility in a way we've never been able to before. We don't have a person or team that's responsible for accessibility in our organization. So when that's the case, I feel like everybody's responsible for something, and at the same time, nobody's responsible for it, right? And so no one is putting those guardrails in place. And of course, the design team can make our recommendations and everything, but at the end of the day, when we're not in the code, it's up to the developers to implement it and all that stuff. So it has been certainly helpful in selling it, to say we'll be able to have more control over the accessibility, be more mindful of it. Now, it's not going to solve everything, of course, but to the degree that we can bake accessibility into each component, it'll help us a lot there. It'll help us move that needle. We opted to engage with one of those, accessibility overlays this year, which we know are not the most loved and highly regarded things in the accessibility world, but it was a thing that would get us there sooner while we figure this stuff out in the long run. It was better than nothing, right?
There you go. It's progress, right? Not perfection.
It's progress. But my hope is in another couple of years, we don't need to resubscribe with them. We'll be ready to take that on internally.
We actually have a person that part of their role is on the engineering side to focus on accessibility and kind of, can call things out and is an expert in it. And we have somebody on my team that is also an accessibility expert in the design space. The challenge we've seen is that just because you center accessibility into a couple of people, they can't police everybody, and it just becomes them trying to play whack-a-mole and they create enemy. It's a really not a great culture structure. So the thing we've been trying to chip away at is create what the definition of done is for each component. And that includes the baseline accessibility standards for whatever level we need to meet. And this is where we then blend into design ops, where now how do we help the design teams and engineering teams when they're going through critiques and reviews, that one of the checklist items is reviewing for accessibility and testing for accessibility standards. That's not baked in process for everything and all teams in a standardized way. All of our teams are supposed to do it, and we've got things that we have to keep a certain standard for because we're also financial services. But it's a much more manual effort versus like a standardized list that everyone is aware of. So it blends into that culture change part, which is where we in design systems end up in that tricky place where it's like, hey, you're the design systems teams, you can solve all the stuff. And we're like, no, we can't solve it all, but we expose that these things aren't to a certain place that we'd like them to be.
Awesome. Well, we have run up to 1 minute left. So yeah, it's fast, right? Which has been amazing. So first of all, I just want to appreciate the panelists and everybody that has come here today, for the webinar. You can reach out to Knapsack, hello at knapsack.cloud. And also, if you head to Knapsack's website, you'll see an events tab in the navigation at the top where you can sign up for more of the webinars too. So yeah, I appreciate everyone, panelists and attendees. So I think this has been pretty awesome. I've got some takeaways personally. I'm actually gonna bake in that process with the spreadsheets as part of the auditing. So I'm gonna absolutely take care of that. So yeah, I just want to thank everybody, and this has been awesome.